talking about mind-altering substances. Welcome to Practical Spirituality here at Torah, overlooking the Temple Mount in the old city of Jerusalem. Shalom, everyone. Human beings love mind-altering substances. From the youngest ages to the oldest ages, people just love that stuff. And one of the things they love about it is, just seeing kids. Like kids, for example, will spin around. Like they love to spin. Adults do not like spinning, but kids will love spinning. And there's actually adults that are involved in a spiritual thing called whirling dervishes. You know what whirling dervishes are? It's from India. You actually whirl around for like an hour until you go into a full trance. There's many things that'll bring us to a mystical state, and that's one of them is whirling dervish. Anyway, children like to have this. You guys can move your chairs a teeny bit so I can see you better in the back. Anyone who's got this camera in their face, or in my face, just slide over a chair or two, okay? Yeah, you slide it over. I like it. I see you guys perfectly, but you may see the camera in front of me. Okay, anyway, but kids like that, they like swings. Like adults aren't that crazy about swings, but kids like that, and that's causing a shift in their brains. And they're kind of like sugar addicts, kids. And they're like constantly going on these sugar fixes. They're like going into sugar highs all the time. Adults and Western adults seem to have no problem with boosting they're doing the mind-altering substances of caffeine. They're really big on caffeine. They love that. They often lose the results, though, because they overdo it. And it doesn't have that same impact that it would have if they would only drink it once a day. Like I do in the morning. I have my fog lifter every morning. Makes a huge difference. Another one is alcohol. Adults really like alcohol, which is kind of a funny drug because it's it really unhinges you a little bit, and in probably ways that you'd be better off hinged, and it also impairs our ability to drive or walk down a flight of stairs and stuff like that. And the majority of violence is actually perpetrated on the influence of alcohol. And it's not so good for the perpetrated as well, the victim, because they may not have, their instincts might not have been on so much under the influence of alcohol, where they could have protected themselves. But human beings just love this stuff. And then there's adrenaline junkies. I'm one of those. So some people just love adrenaline. They got a lead foot. I just had to enroll in driving school today. Like I've been driving since I stole my first car when I was 12. And here I am, like almost 40 years later. I had to enroll in driving school. I called the lady, I'm like, I do not need driving school. And she's like, well, according to your record, you do. And I'm like, the speeding ticket was someone else driving my car. And the other one was, I forgot to renew my registration. Neither of which requires driving school for me. I wasn't the guy caught speeding. And she's like, you're going to love it. Rabbi, you need time off. You just need 4 hours just to enjoy someone teaching you how to drive again. And so I enrolled in driving school. But the adrenaline junkies are really into mind alteration, altering our mind state. So I'd like to just discuss why for a moment, why we're so into this. I didn't mention the other ones. Obviously cannabis is crazy. Craze. It's all the craze. Everyone's really into cannabis. We even have someone here from Seattle, the Big C, which is coffee. No, the Big C. No, I'm talking about what's on every block. Okay. The stores. Every store, on every block is either craft beer, which is just incredible craft beer in Seattle. Denver's the same. But at least Seattle begins with a C. Craft beer, coffee, and cannabis on every block. Anyway, but they really believe in their think about it, they're all mind-altering, and they're on every block you walk. I mean, it is such a fun city to visit because you're just, every other store, you're in a different state of mind, as you move along over there. And anyway, but that's cannabis, amongst many other mind-altering substances that people are into. So the question is why, and I believe the reason why has to do with contrast. that we like contrast. And you have your sober state, and then you have your mind-altered state. And it just causes certain things. Like, for example, the ability to not take yourself so seriously. That occurs, usually with alcohol, for example. People on alcohol don't take themselves as seriously. That's why you say the stupid things you do when you're under the influence of alcohol, and you just stop looking good, in what you're willing to share on alcohol. Your inhibitions have gone down, but you're willing to be more of a fool, and being more of a fool is probably a good thing, considering you're a fool to begin with, and hiding the fact that you're a fool is, just makes you uptight. And so it's much better and more fun to be with you when you're willing to take that risk. And to quote Jordan Peterson, he says that all innovation begins with foolishness. And every field of greatness, anyone becomes great, you got to make some really dumb mistakes on the path towards your greatness. So just to tell you a quick story on that is I was at the Kotel, and I was there praying, and my students from Aish Torah here, Aish Torah is really big on outreach. Like, we really believe in outreach. Like, if you know Aleph, you are now obligated to teach Aleph. You know the letter Bet, you are now obligated to teach the letter Bet. Like, you're a teacher the second you know something in Aish Torah. Like, it's really built in our culture here, is that your obligation is reaching out with whatever it is you know. And there'll be a debate at Aish Torah. It's like, the big debate amongst the students is, well, what if I haven't integrated it yet? Meaning, what if I just know it, but I'm not doing anything about it? And Rabbi Weinberg Zatzal, our leader of blessed memory, says, even if you haven't integrated it, the guy you're talking to may integrate it. He may be more of higher integrity. So for you not to share it means he's going to miss his growth, because you haven't grown. Why shouldn't you be sharing this? So he says, share even that which you haven't integrated to the people who may integrate it. Okay. So anyway, we're down at the Kotel, and I was kind of minding my own business down there and praying. But my students here were running around, the crowds of birthright kids and everyone, like running around the crowds trying to find someone to reach out to. They were just looking for a Jew of ignorant background, meaning a Jew who doesn't know a lot and about Judaism. Yeah, we're talking about ignorant of Judaism. I don't care if the guy got a PhD in rocket science. He's ignorant Jewishly if he didn't study Judaism. Anyway, they're looking for anyone who's ignorant of Judaism, and they find somebody. And what they do with them? They brought him to me. I thought they were going to do the dirty work, of enlightening him to all about Judaism. Anyway, so about 6 of my students show up with this guy. And they're like, Rabbi Glazer, meet this secular Jew. I don't think they even knew his name. If you're going to influence a guy, you got to at least get his name. So I said, hey, what's your name? His name was John. And I'm like, nice to meet you, John. And then I looked at my students. I said, why'd you bring me a Mormon? And my students looked shocked. So did John. And John's like, how'd you know I'm a Mormon? And I said, can you see a Mormon a mile away? He says, how? I said, I can tell that you've never had a drop of alcohol your entire life. He's like, right. And I said, I don't trust people who don't drink alcohol. He's like, why? We should be the most trustworthy. And I say, no, because you don't know how to laugh at yourself. He says, I can laugh at myself. I said, well, grab a prayer book and join that minion over there. Join that group over there. My brother happened to be leading a group of prayer, so I sent the Mormon into my brother's group, to go pray with them. So I believe our desire for mind-altering states is a lot of it is the contrast of that mind-altering state, the fool, with the sane, normal you, and to be able to laugh at yourself a little bit, to get more honest, to get more true, to be able to share yourself more. In Judaism seriously believes in this. We even have a mitzvah to drink wine on various days of the year. First of all, Shabbat. Every Shabbat, we have to alter our state of consciousness. Now wine can cause a expansion of consciousness. At least one glass can. And we are obligated every Shabbat night to drink a full cup of wine. Now, of course, your host is probably going to hand you a thimble of grape juice. So you should just throw it back at him. Yeah, tell him, because the obligation is, why do you think our sages said that to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush, you have to drink a full cup of wine? And the answer is because you're probably in a more constricted consciousness coming after a week of study. Did I say study? Sorry, I've been hanging out in Jerusalem so long that I said a week of study. You're probably in more of a constricted state of consciousness after a week of work. No one works in Jerusalem. So, and you're now in Shabbat, which is a totally expanded spectrum. But your mind still, you just got back from work. You've been dealing with, wheeling and dealing all week. And now you're in this expanded place called Shabbos. Our sages say, start with a full cup of alcoholic wine, not grape juice. You need wine. And that maybe will open you up to be in tune with the vibrational energy of Shabbat. Now, if you're already in tune, so go for the grape juice. But a lot of people who are drinking grape juice should definitely be drinking wine. And there's also this interesting thing called Shabbos rage. You heard of road rage, right? So there's something called Shabbos rage. Probably none of you have ever felt it. But once you're married with children, and you have your own like little Shabbos cave there where you and your family have Shabbat, there's something that happens inside men, and ladies, watch out for this too. There's something that happens inside men where there's a little bit of rage when they come home Shabbos night. It's strange. It's not so explainable, although the one explanation that it might be is the Shabbos is the feminine. Shabbos is the receiving. Like you are not acting upon the world on Shabbat. You are refraining from 39 principles of matter, of manipulating the world in some way or another. There's 39 ways to manipulate the world, and that's the masculine when we do that. Even for the ladies during the week, you are doing the masculine when you're manipulating things. Come Shabbat, we are now refraining from manipulating the world. On the opposite, we are now receiving from God, who's the causer in the case of creation. And so a lot of men are not that happy about Shabbat coming in. Many men feel emasculated by Shabbat. And men want to make their mark. They want to mark every lamppost they walk by as a territory. And it pains men, for example, that no one will remember us 100 years from now. And that's pretty scary, that no one's going to remember you. And that's even with a contribution. Meaning, like, having a contribution, like, for example, I have a very powerful contribution. At least the feedback seems to say so. But my heart says so as well. I feel instinctually I have a lot to contribute. And no one's going to remember me 100 years from now. I mean, unless I figure out something really crazy, but whatever I'm doing, which is a hell of a lot crazier than anything you guys are doing at this point. So I suggest you get crazier, which I'm always trying to motivate people to get crazier in their lives. And the reason why I want you to be crazier isn't so someone remembers you 100 years from now, because you'd have to be darn crazy to get remembered 100 years later. Notice that probably no one in this room can raise their hand and tell me something that their own family member did 100 years ago. And it's your own family. You might know a name. If they wrote a book, maybe you know its title. If you're a good great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchild, you read it. But no one's going to remember us. Like, we just have to get over that and live for the moment, which is Shabbat, and just be there and receive. And there's a certain rage men get when they come home that night. And don't forget, where are they coming home from? Where are men coming home from on Shabbat night? From shul. And can you get anything more emasculating than synagogue? I mean, just to get the thing started, they need 10 men. You could be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you walk through the door, and they're like, 7. Who you calling 7? Do you know who you're talking with? But the answer is, 7. Sit down and open up a prayer book, because we're going to get started as soon as 10 walks in. Yeah, and meaning you just don't matter in synagogue. You matter because everyone matters, but in the genre called synagogue, you're part of now community. You're wearing your community hat. And by the way, our Kabbalists say, the Vilna Gaon says something amazing. One of the great Kabbalists, he says that if on Rosh Hashanah you were blessed, the first day of the year you were blessed to have life, meaning you're going to live this year. You know how we have that who's going to live, who's going to die prayer? And the answer is you're going to live, but God needs to rip out a section of the Jewish people. He's going to harvest some souls with, God forbid, a terror attack or something like that. You lose your individual blessing when you're in synagogue, or you're in a bus, or you're here, or you're there, or you're anywhere you're in a crowd. You lose you understand? That's a heavy Kabbalistic statement, that it doesn't matter that you were blessed for life when you're wearing your community hat. I hope I'm not making people think twice about going to synagogue. It was already bad, just having to kind of tuck in your wings, because you have such unique wings, and we all do. But, you got to tuck them in when you go to synagogue. And it's quite fun. And not to mention, you got to bend over, you got to you literally got to just bow down. Totally. And you'll notice most people, when they get to Aleinu, for example, they're like, "V'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim." That's about all that you get from these guys. Because they're like, no man's going to go 90 degrees for God. The Judaism's just there to strip us of our masculine ego. They're just here to strip the alpha male out of you, is what Judaism's all about. And in fact, of course, Jewish law says what? Give a token this, or go full yogic 90. Which one do you think the Jewish law says? Full yogic 90-degree angle, man. You're supposed to just go bend in half. Just bend in half before God. And the Kabbalists click on that law. The law is bend in half. You know what the Kabbalists say there? They say that if it weren't for the fact that this prayer is on your feet, you should be flat on your face. So while you do your 90 degree, have in mind you're flat on your face. It's just that it'd be hard to get up and be in the same spot. So when you're doing a standing prayer, like the silent prayer or Aleinu, and you do your 90 degree, have in mind you're flat on your face. But I suggest for all you guys who are somewhat showing up in prayers or do it regularly, to just practice that. Practice that. Do your 90 degrees. You can do it alone if it's embarrassing. Do it in your bedroom or something, and just see if you can do it. See if you can prostrate before God. It's not an easy thing for a man. And so there's a certain amount of rage. So that might have something to do with the wine on Shabbos night. It's get the wine in there. Get the wine inside him. In my house, not because of the rage, but not only do I do kiddush on the wine, while the kids are drinking the wine, and my wife's drinking the wine, and if we have guests, which is rare, but they're drinking the wine, guess what I'm drinking? Craft beer, and not just one. Meaning, there's times where I have 4, 5, 6, 7 craft beers lined up, already poured, in order of hoppiness, because you can't drink a hoppier beer. A less hoppy beer after a hoppier beer. Because hoppy beers just pulverize your taste buds. And so there's a spot there or in front, wherever you want. Okay, so hoppy beers just pulverize your taste buds, and so you have to build up on the hoppiness as you go. Yo, what's up?
What up?
Hey, welcome. There's a couple seats up here if you want to flank. Maybe you come to this one and you can flank around to this one. What's happening? Yeah, you can come this way. Yeah, you can come through here. I don't care. Just say hi when you walk by the camera and watch the cable.
Is that your shiur the other night?
Oh, is that a shiur that you're at one of my shiur? I spoke at night?
Yeah.
I don't remember speaking at night.
I don't remember anything either usually.
I speak much better at night usually. I'm a night person.
I'll let you know.
In fact, the later it gets, the more energy I get as the night goes on, which is really horrible for getting a good night's sleep. It was so bad last night. I started going to bed at 12:30. I fell asleep at 3:06. And part of my problem is half my students and clients from my company are in America, and they're finally off work when it's bedtime. So all of a sudden WhatsApp's just like, help, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. And how much better you go to bed? How much better do you sleep knowing you helped someone before you went to sleep?
Much better.
And I had two jumpers yesterday, so that got even more serious. Although one I don't take very seriously, the other one a little more serious. Now, where were we at? Hoppy beers. By the way, I don't drink the 6 beers. I take a sip off each beer and pass it to the guests. I send it around the table, and then we all just kind of share germs as everyone gets to taste each of the beers. And I try to make sure that those beers are Israeli brewed beers, which are some of the best beers in the world. And I love watching the new guests to Israel just saying like, I can't believe it. And then they try the next one and they're like, I can't believe it. And then they try the next one and they're like, I can't believe it. And then if they really just keep screaming, I can't believe it, that means they must have smoked up before Shabbos came in. I mean, the beer is good, but it's not that good. Okay? So, anyway, so watch out for Shabbos rage. Anyway, but we like altered states of consciousness, and when it comes to like really tuned in Judaism, what's the ultimate altered state of consciousness? The ultimate altered state of consciousness is to go into a mystical trance. Going into a mystical trance is like kind of, for many substances, that is the goal. There's many substances out there that the goal is for you to have a mystical experience. Well, that is the goal in Judaism. Judaism's ultimate goal is that you would have a full-on mystical experience, a first-hand mystical experience, a mystical experience that you could never explain. If the seas were ink and the forest, the trees in the forest were quill, and the land of the earth were paper, you would never finish. You'd run out of ink, quills, and paper before you could have explained that one moment. That's a mystical experience. And you should be so determined to have that. You know why you should be so determined? Doesn't that sound frustrating? If you were that determined to have that, wouldn't that be frustrating? Because if you didn't have it, no. If you're so determined to have it, you will figure out what's in the way. And you'll get to work on yourself. Because if you're not having it, there's something in the way. It's not that God's not the one with the problem, guys. God's not having any problem giving mystical experiences to people. They're actually for free. They're fully available. I could even produce one for you right now, but we're not going to go there just because we're supposed to be doing a whole other class. But you can have your mystical experience for sure. If you're not having it, don't point your finger at God. And if you do point your finger at God, it's 3-1. Where are the other 3 fingers pointing? Everyone say right back at you. Can we do that again? Where are the other 3 fingers pointing?
Right back at you.
Right back at you. That there's probably something in the way of it. And it could be as simple as the fact that if you had it, you'd have to change your life. Right? If you had your full mystical experience, you'd have to realign things, wouldn't you? And so maybe that's why you're not having it. So whatever, there's a lot of reasons why that we could look at that are getting in the way of our mystical experience. Yeah?
Is having one of those mystical experiences, I guess, on a form of substance, like hallucinogen?
So in Judaism, so the question was, is that,
Well, I think
yeah,
does it make it any less like potent or godly? You know what I'm saying? Does it make it
if it's on a substance? That's an interesting question. Is it less of a mystical experience if you cheated by eating a mushroom? No. It's just as mystical an experience. It may lack context. You know, like meaning you go for the mystical experience in Judaism, you know exactly where to go with that for the rest of your life. You have a mystical experience on a mushroom. You wake up the next day, you're like, what do I do? Eat another? How many days can you keep eating mushrooms and having your mystical experience? So it would lack context. That's why you'll notice in the therapeutic world of psychedelic medicines, they will always say that it should be buttressed by. Sorry about that, everybody.
Still recording.
Yeah, good. I thought you guys had like an amazing question. You're just telling me that I'm getting a phone call. Okay, so thank you. Yeah.
What do you mean that you can give us a mystical experience?
Oh, meaning we could do like a quick mindfulness exercise that would short circuit the kind of the overstimulation of your thinking, such that it would go offline for a moment, and in that moment we could all connect to a really much bigger consciousness that you would be breathing into a space that's mystical by nature. And I do it a lot. We're just not doing it right now. Okay? Yeah.
What is the relationship between that state of consciousness and Hashem? Because there has to be something there.
Well, God's the one who created the mushroom. So you can't say there's that big a difference, but it's not Hashem that your question is. It's Judaism. Judaism is a path of enlightenment, of mystical consciousness. That's what it is. I know all of you are looking at me like, huh? My rabbi didn't say that when I was growing up. That's because Judaism became a religion. It became a religion. They killed it. Okay? They killed our Judaism. And Judaism was turned into one of the world's religions. It's like when I'm at JFK and I want to pray, there's a what do they call those things? If you ask the Gentiles where it is, it's a chapel. Yeah, where's the chapel? And when you're walking along, it's JFK, so it's like all the different chapels of all the religions, and it doesn't make any sense that Judaism, because if you look at it from a distance, you're just like, okay, there's the different religions, and there's Judaism on the end over there, another religion. Meaning they basically killed it for us. Now, by the way, I'm not here to blame Jewish clergy at all. I mean, let's see you dedicate your life to Jewish continuity. They're only trying to keep us going. So by all means, they get nothing but kudos from me. But I understand where they fell, and why people are coming to my class and they're not going to theirs is because Jewish continuity has to be, at this point, meaning maybe before the 60s, it doesn't have to be this. They were able to create more or less a conveyor belt education system of Judaism, but really spiritually and even historically, before 200 years ago was the break into religion. But historically, and the last 200 years, it became a religion. But since the 1960s, it either touches you in the depth of your heart or it's irrelevant. You understand that? You guys get that? Raise your hand if you get that it's either going to touch you in a way that is transformational for you, or it's not relevant. Raise your hand if that means something to you. Okay, and the rest of you are religious. I mean, tell me who's more religious. Raise your hand if you've had a Jewish, anyone here has had a mystical experience in their Jewish life, like they've had it. Okay, so many of you. So now if I take an example of Josh, right? I just met Josh. Josh, do you light candles on Hanukkah?
Yeah.
You do. And is that a religious move, or is that a move that's informed by having had a mystical experience? Where are you at? All you have to do is think back to December last year.
Right.
When you were lighting those candles, were you part of that? Or did the mystical thing happen after Hanukkah?
I think it was a bit of both. I think it's hard to pin down one.
Uh-huh.
Like
There's a religious aspect that a Jew lights Hanukkah.
like growing up, it was something my family would do all the time.
Which is what? Religion.
But if you would ask, why are we doing this, no one would have an answer.
Right.
And that was the strangest thing.
Yeah, they're doing things without a reason
Right.
because of a narrative of a particular group of people is called religion. Whereas the mystical experience and now lighting Hanukkah candles is that a religious move. That's not a religious move. You know what that is? That is a natural progression. That is a natural progression of an expression of a connectivity to, the ultimate, which, we don't even know what it is, but it's some connection to the ultimate that I'm now going to like squeeze it down. I'm going to squelch it down to this lighting of this menorah. Like I'm gonna light a menorah with this.
It's more of a tradition.
No, tradition's the religious one. Meaning tradition means it's been done before by others. My parents, my grandparents. That's religion. When you've had a mystical experience, now you light Hanukkah candles from a very different perspective. Now, it's a great way of knowing the difference is if we're not feeling it. I mean, do we always feel connected? What if you're feeling totally disconnected and it's Hanukkah night, third candle, and you're feeling disconnected and you just had an argument with your wife and your kid's diaper leaked through onto your khaki pants? I'm using that word, pun intended, in your khaki pants. And your wife's like, time to light Hanukkah, dear. Are you going to light or are you not going to light? What are you going to do? You're going to light those candles and that's going to be a move of religion or a move of a mystical expression. Which one? Religion. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when Judaism gets relegated to only that, and it's not because I've been touched personally, that's where it loses its relevance. And of all your lighting that week, of the 8 candles, which is the one that was the least relevant to that person? The third candle. Now, you should know something amazing is that, do you think God holds a special place in his heart for someone who lights a Hanukkah candle when he's not feeling it? What do you think?
Yes.
Is there a special place in his heart? There is a special place. And do you know we have a term for it? You know what it's called? I'll give you the Hebrew one first. It's called Eved. Anyone want to translate Eved for me? Slave. And why would God hold a special place in his heart for slave? Because you guys, does anyone here have a positive connotation of slavery? No, not at all. But there is something special in the heart of God for slave. You know what it is? You see, whenever you do anything for anyone, you're getting something. Unless you're a slave. When you're a slave, I mean, you're getting something. You're not getting whipped, I guess. You're not getting, God knows what people might do to a slave. Although in Judaism, there's laws how to treat a slave. But in the rest of the world, slavery was a very cruel thing. The funny thing is that we once put all the rules you have, if you have a slave in Jewish law, against life of a kibbutznik. You would choose slave any day over life on kibbutz. But again, everyone who likes, you get these atheists in the dark web, that the intellectual dark web, they love, like Sam Harris loves to use slavery as the example of how archaic Judaism is and stuff. When he's mouthing off about his atheism, but meanwhile, that guy doesn't know his ass from his elbow when it comes to Jewish law regarding slaves. And if he did know, he would choose slavery over joining a kibbutz. I mean, you can't even eat before your slaves eat. Your slaves aren't allowed to work on Shabbos. It brings up a bigger subject of what does it mean to have your handiwork owned by another human being. That's a subject that's worth talking about, and I'd be happy to discuss the negative side of that. And so would our Torah. And you want to know something? If a slave ever was supposed to be freed, if a Jewish slave was ever to be freed, why? Because he finally worked off the money he owed? Because what is a Jewish slave? A Jewish slave is a slave that owed money and didn't have it. And so now his handiwork belongs to that guy. But that guy has to feed him and house him and take care of him. And it's crazy. I'd rather just forget it. I release the money you owe me. But let's just say that it was a lot of money And it's worth taking care of this guy and getting his handiwork. Let's just say that. But no matter what year he joins you, it could be the 6th year he joins you, comes that 7th year, what happens to your slave, even though he owes you a good 4 years worth of work? 7th year is the sabbatical year. He goes free. And if he chooses not to go free, there's a ceremony that takes place where you bring him to the door. I forget why the door exactly. And you take a piercer and you pierce his ear. You pierce his ear against the door. I guess you have to have a backdrop when you pierce a guy's ear. But, it's the door. Now, how do you get a guy's earlobe against the door? I have no idea. But I guess you twist it and put it against the door and whang. I guess I'm sure we can figure this out. There's something about this guy now being stuck to the door, at least until you get him off. But you pierce his ear. You know what it is about the door? Oh, does anyone here know about the door? Well, it's your. Oh, maybe it's the mezuzah. Oh, Ahuva nails it, because it says specifically. It says the doorpost. Well, what's on the doorpost of the mezuzah? And what's in the mezuzah? Shema Yisrael. And what's Shema Yisrael? Is when every individual in the world's freed, because you realize that all there is God, which means all of this. Okay, we're going a little mystical here. All of this is a figment of God's imagination. Think about it. If all there is God, this is a digital simulation. You don't actually exist. All that exists is God. And you're just distracted by your brain all the time. But really, all there is God. And if all there is God, but you've been granted consciousness, you are free. And the person who heard that at Sinai chooses to be indentured to another human being, boom, right through the ear. The guy who heard that, boom, right through the ear. And this is why you'll notice observant Jews, it doesn't matter if you already did it because you didn't know better, but observant Jews don't have, Jewish men don't have ear piercings. Observant Jewish men do not pierce their ears. And that's why. Because of this little ceremony, which is a commandment in the Torah, that to pierce the ear of a guy who wants to stay indentured to another human being. Because he heard the words that free us. And he chooses to not be free. Aren't we supposed to be talking about mind-altering substances here? A bunch of questions. So that guy in the back was first.
So, to bring you back to mind-altering substances. So when you're in this mystical state, when you're speaking like from the Judaism aspect,
yeah.
it's kind of, wouldn't you say it's like another way of like experiencing miracles, quote unquote? Like if you're in this mind-altering state, you experience things differently?
Mystical kind of means also beyond nature, which is miraculous.
Right.
Go on.
If you're taking these substances, isn't that kind of a way of saying like, I'm not waiting for your miracles, God, I'm gonna make my own? Kind of like I'm taking this for the sole purpose of experiencing the world in the way I want it.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting for you to do something so I see it from you.
Yeah, so I don't know if they can hear on my lapel mic, but you're saying, isn't that a way, someone doing it through substances instead of Judaism is saying, like, I don't want to wait around for this. Not to mention the fact that, like how dedicated in Judaism do you have to be to start having mystical Jewish experiences? Probably a lot more dedicated than anyone in this room is. So you understand, like, that's a pretty serious dedication. Not to mention you're going to need a bunch of more details. Like, for example, you need a mentor who's achieved this to show you the way. If you have a mentor who knows a bunch of Jewish laws, but he's never had a mystical experience, he cannot help you get to your mystical experience. You get that? He knows a lot of Jewish law. You can call him your rabbi when you have a question. You do not expect having a mystical experience under him, as your rabbi. You get that? So that's why we distinguish the word rabbi and rebbe, because a rebbe is someone who can get you to a mystical experience, whereas a rabbi can answer questions. Now, and could it be said that that someone taking that substance is saying, I'm not waiting around for you, God, but if I have a way to go straight to the punch, so I'm going straight to the punch. So I think God would say, Kol hakavod, like thanks for having a little courage. because it takes, by the way, you should know that even though it sounds like the shortcut, raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about, that having these mystical experiences using substances takes about every last ounce of courage you have. Raise your hand if you know that, what I'm talking about on that. I mean, it's just going to take every ounce of courage. In fact, the likelihood of you having a bad trip, which is the worst stage of hell one could ever get in their life, the likelihood of you having a bad trip is probably going to be because you're so darn nervous to go drop into that world. Or I don't know if you call it drop in or rising up to it, but it is scary. It is scary. And you want to know something? The grand master of all psychedelic experience, Terence McKenna, he says, Oliver Sholem, Terence McKenna says, he says, I mean, this guy's like a human laboratory. I mean, there's no one's had more psychedelics than this man. And he would, every time he did it, he would do it with a heroic dose and then add cannabis to it. He'd take a heroic dose, like a dose that would, like, you would not come out okay probably on such a dose, and then add cannabis to it. And this is what he did regularly. And I mean, as regularly as you could, because obviously you'd need to take off from that a couple months after such a thing. But he would do it every couple months. And but you know what he said? He said, anyone who would get involved in such a thing and is not scared out of his mind is crazy. That's him. He said that. You know, meaning you go into there with fear. And you know what the likelihood of having a bad trip is? The time you take it not afraid. So the fear could cause the bad trip, or going in with ego. Like, I got this. I can hack it. That's when God's going to teach you a major lesson. You know, you're about to have your you know what kicked so hard for the next, several hours, that you're going to be just praying you had made it. You're going to be begging you had wished you'd made another decision that day for how to spend that day. So, it's not something to be taken lightly. But in answer to your question, we have to ask ourselves another question, and that is that why did these things that were always relegated to tribes in jungles, African jungles, Indian jungles, where's that place where they used to send people in Russia? Siberia, Ukrainian forests where tribes existed. The South American Amazon jungle. Like, you got to ask yourself, why did God have these things show up at rock concerts all of a sudden in New York City? Knowing full well that Jews would probably be attending that concert. You understand? Like, there's not a joke. And not to mention the fact that this is a piece of trivia that a lot of people don't know. This is something really fabulous, is that after Passover till Shavuos, there's a count of 7 weeks. And those are very mystical weeks, because the sevens are the actual ways of creation. So it's flow, structure, beauty, perseverance, focus, connection, and recipient, otherwise known as Chesed Gevurah Tiferes Netzach Hod Yisod. So we count those 7 days. So each day of the 7, we count those 7 weeks. Each day is one of the 7 within the 7. You understand? So the 6th day of the 6th week was the 6-day war. And guess what happened on that day as well? Well, first of all, the whole entire mystical tradition of Jews returning to Judaism began on that day. A lot of people don't realize that the massive return towards Judaism that's taken place, what's known as the Bali Tshuva, the BTs, which are now every community is filled with Bali Tshuva. That had a date. Did you know it had a date? It had a date, and that date was 1967. I don't know the English date, but it was the 6th day. It was the 6th day of the 6th Sphira. Was the 6th-day war. What is the 6th, by the way? The 6th, I said before, it's connection, but the literal translation is foundation. Yesod means foundation, like this building has a foundation. Well, guess what happened on that day? On that day, the Temple Mount, which is right behind me over here, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but that Temple Mount over there that we were relegated to were like outside Jaffa Gate. This is when the Jews got back at least their east-west biblical property and got back the Temple Mount, which means the Temple Mount, which is where the gold dome is, under that gold dome is a stone. Guess what that stone is called? It's called the Even Shatia or Even Shatia. And what does that mean? It means the foundation stone. It's the foundation of the whole creation. That is the foundation of this world. And so on the foundation, the day called Foundation of Foundations, we get back our access to the foundation stone to be used at a later time. So they just kept the, the giant catered chicken roast underneath that gold dome there. Yeah, so it's still, it's waiting underneath that gold dome for us. At the right time, it will be revealed. On that day, LSD, you can come in. Come on in. You can come in. On that day, that was a day that was marked. You have to check Google for this, but on that day, that was the marked day where LSD left the laboratories, because LSD was considered one of the most promising drugs in the psychiatric world. Only today, in 2008, when they decided to get it back inside, because the other psychiatric drugs have so badly failed us, that they've decided now to bring back psychedelics for treatment. And things are going to be FDA approved by the end of this year even. And there's already cities that are refusing to prosecute now for these substances. Denver being one of them, Oakland, California being another. And it's, this is all coming to a theater near you. But and you don't even have to go to the movies to watch the film. So anyway, on that day was the biggest leak of the compound LSD, which was only being used psychiatrically, was the day it leaked into the streets. And I even had a rabbi here who was a personal rabbi of mine, a mystic for sure, who he was 18 years old, a senior in high school, on that day in Greenwich Village, Lower East Side of Manhattan, where he was going to high school. And he said that it was of the most mystical days ever. That day moved the mindset of humanity. And that's why I was saying earlier to everyone in this room, and everyone watching this, I was saying earlier that was the day where Judaism from then on will either be a mystical experience you've had, nothing to do with substances. It ushered in that you yourself can have a mystical experience. It's not something you read about. It's not just something in a story or folklore or legends. It's something that you have. You have mystical experiences. And from that day on, when educators thought they could just keep you in the system without your having been touched deeply by God, however it is, whether it's through Judaism, whether it's through a substance, but it got to the point where if you haven't been touched deeply, it's not that relevant to you. From that point on. Before that point, okay, I'm part of this community, this is what we do. After that point, it's got to touch you. It's got to touch you personally, which is exactly what happened in those days. Now, you should know the Baal Tshuva movement began here on that day, because what happened was Israelis everywhere realized the miracle. Now, Israelis have short-term memory. So, meaning even the biggest atheist in Tel Aviv was like this, like looking at heaven, just going like, like they were like, the biggest atheist in Tel Aviv was like flat on his face before God for the miracles of the 6-Day War. But, they went right back to their thing, But the young people who were there, the soldiers who were there, who saw firsthand the miracles in combat, the pilots that saw, that when they were going to their next site and were able to wipe out whole entire fleets before they could even get off the ground, and they just saw how we doubled our territory. We got back to our east-west biblical borders all in 6 days with almost no casualties. The miracles of that day, but they're miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, like crazy stuff. And every soldier you'll meet who was fighting during the 6-Day War will tell you his own wild story. I mean, I heard a first-hand story of a guy driving his Jeep racing as fast as he could away from did I say jeep? Driving a tank, racing as fast as he could away from being chased. And all of a sudden he saw a picture of he saw an old man in talis and tefillin, like just got in harm's way. So he couldn't kill him. Couldn't kill him. He turned his jeep suddenly after a long straightaway. Just turned his jeep, wound up crashing. I don't know what happened to him, but the jeeps that couldn't turn in time that were chasing him blew up there. They all were blown to smithereens there. When he went to visit his grandmother, like a week after the 6-Day War, he saw that man. That man was on her wall in a picture. It was a little picture of her grandfather, of her father. And that's why he turned his Jeep. He didn't know it was a picture of that. He just saw an old man in tefillin. When you're driving a Jeep, driving a tank full speed in hot pursuit of the enemy pursuing you, that's why he turned the tank. It was not to knock out this Jew there. And it turned out to be his own great grandfather. Now but this started the Baal Tshuva movement in Israel, which is a massive movement, way bigger than the West. We're used to like Western English-speaking Baal Tshuvas, but the Israeli movement's way bigger than the Western movement. Yeah, I know you would never notice that walking around Tel Aviv, but as you get around the country, you meet a lot of Israeli Baal Tshuva. It's a huge movement here, and yeah. So yeah.
So I have a question and perspective, like your opinion on this. So I think that.
Wait, before you ask, I just want to mention that it may sound like I'm advocating this. Does it sound like I'm advocating it?
Yes.
And what do you answer, Josh?
I don't think you're advocating for it.
Not advocating for it at all. Why would you think I was advocating for it? What would make you think that? What? Maybe we want to do it.
No, we want you to be advocating.
Maybe you want me to be advocating for it. What was I doing instead? What was I doing? I was definitely, I'm telling you right now, I don't advocate it, and I wasn't advocating for it. And the majority of people who email me after these classes who say, should I do it? What do you think I say? No. So sometimes the answer is an unequivocal yes, but usually it's no. And by the way, when would be the yes? I'll give you an example of a yes last week. Someone who suffered serial molestation. I'm saying that nicely. A female as a child suffered this. And I'm saying it all very nicely. And she's now about $60,000 worth of therapy later. She's now in her almost 38 years old. She's 37. And she's getting really tired. Really, really tired of getting that out of her bones. Because this is that kind of affect. It's called affect. You maybe don't know that term, but that's called affect, is when trauma hits the cells. And there's no greater therapy for cellular trauma than psychedelic plant medicines. And so that's just those are the facts. And for me not to advocate for that woman would be just the same as being cruel. And so there's no blanket answers for such things. But the answer was I was not advocating at all. Quite the opposite. All I'm doing is sharing level-headed information about subjects, which is all I'm ever doing, is trying to give a fair share of these subjects. And also you should know how divine it is, by the way, because the materialist atheists on the intellectual dark web, how are they going to explain mystical experiences induced? Well, they tell you, well, it's in the brain. It's in the brain. Maybe it's all going on in the brain, except go meet anyone who's had it. They will tell you things about the divine that they just shouldn't know. But they know, and they just never studied it, but now they know it. Another example is I've met mystics from jungles of the world, And I, because I'm a musician, I've been in situations where I got to hear them sing. The tribal songs. But not just any tribal songs when they're on their medicines, the mystical medicines. And guess what's in the song? Every single syllable of the song is either the letter Yud, Hey, Vav, or Aleph, which is just 2 Yuds and a Vav. Every single syllable. And I actually asked a mystic, I said to him, those are all the letters of the names of God. And he's like, well, I know that. How did you know that? And meaning he doesn't know the letters, he just knows the sounds. And he's like, he said, how did you know that? And I opened up a prayer book and, on my smartphone, and I just showed him, like, hello, that's the Yud sound, and that's the Vav sound, and that's the Hey sound, and that's the Aleph. And I said, where did you learn these songs? And he said that the medicine taught us. The medicine itself taught them. They were taught by the medicine. So, good luck being a materialist atheist and explaining how mystics on psychedelic potions somehow come out with Hebrew for their songs, where every single syllable of every single song is names of God. Which immediately brought me the question of, am I allowed to sing it? I'm serious. Can I? If I knew the song, could I sing it? And so a rabbi answered me. He said, this syllable you could say, that syllable you could say, that syllable you can't say, that one you can't say, this one you can say. And he went through it, and he explained what you couldn't say, which kind of made me throw the whole thing out, because, what am I going to be sitting there singing part of a song? What am I going to sing every third syllable of a song? So I'm just not going to be singing that song. Okay, I see a bunch more questions, but it's 4:20. So I guess you can ask me privately. I realize I need a much longer format when I speak. Rabbi, is there a chance I can switch to the last hour of the day? Remember we used to do this with that famous rabbi, Dan Katz. His class just went into the night. Remember that? I'm not asking to do that. But I definitely realize I need more time every class, but way more time. Okay, everybody, our next class is